now we would like to introduce our speaker for today's event, John Bates. He is the leadership communications expert and CEO of Executive Speaking Success. He trains Navy Special Operations. He trains leaders at NASA, including all the active astronauts. He works with top leaders at Johnson & Johnson and Boston Scientific, and he's here with us today thanks to Kim Flores of Waterford.org. So I'm actually going to turn the time over to Kim for a second and let her tell you why she invited him to speak.
Well, thank you, Jen. Well, it was at Snowbird a couple years ago, and again, I apologize for the echo, at Waterford.org's Partner Summit, back when we still had in-person events, when a man with lightsabers hopped on the stage and explained the science behind being a great public speaker. And while his lightsaber skills are impressive, I was really amazed at his ability to transform a couple of brave volunteers' elevator pitches into these amazing attention-grabbing stories that the audience could really connect with. Since then, John has worked with Waterford.org's leadership team on their personal stories. He calls it science. I think it's magic. So do yourself a favor, please grab a pen and paper, take some notes because you guys are going to want to remember this. John Bates, thank you so much for volunteering your time today to teach us how to be public speaking Jedis.
You are very welcome, and thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it very much, Kim. And I want to start by sharing with you my context for being here with you today at the Business Women's Forum. If you look at the entire planet Earth and you measure things, anything that matters to human beings, wherever on Earth you measure, on any measure that you measure that matters to human beings, wherever women are doing better, everything's doing better. Children, animals, the economy, the environment, even men are doing better wherever women are doing better. And I want you to know that is my context for being here today. And it's one of the big reasons that I very much want to give you all of the best principles and ideas that I can to empower your voice. And now, let me share with you something that I always share on these large group meetings. And I want to start by saying you don't have to do this, okay? I'm just going to make a request and you don't have to do this. I get you're grown-ups and you make the best decisions for you, that's fine. And I'm on the hook for the next, almost an hour. I'm on the hook and I'm okay with that. So I'm the one that really has to show up on video. But what I'd like to offer to you is how much it would mean to me and to everybody else who's on the call to be able to see you. And I know that we've all been through a pandemic and we've all got pandemic haircuts, probably many of us still, I know I do. So, if you're having a bad hair day, it's actually okay. We're all having a bad hair day. And the principle that I would offer you is to just never underestimate the difference it makes for other people on the call to be able to see you. Because we miss doing these things in person. We miss being with each other. And when you come onto video and we can say, oh, hey, there's Diana Young and there's Mark Applebaum and there's Connie. I love it when she smiles there in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, it just makes us feel it's like the next best thing to being there. You remember that? When we all used to pay hundreds of dollars for long distance calls. So thanks for coming onto video. Now, switching it over into the leadership angle of this, when you're on calls like this at work, where you may not be the one leading the call, but you're still on the hook because you're part of the team. If you're not on video, you are definitely not maximizing your leadership presence. If people are having a video call and you're not on that video, everybody thinks you're probably checking your email and doing other things, Now, what I will say is some organizations, I was just talking with a guy I supported, the National Guard, and he said, we do video meetings now where we normally used to have junior people come into the room with us, but we say, just call in and hang out, turn your video off. And if we have a question for you, we'll say, hey, Ginger, come on video. Tell what's the answer to this question. And that allows people to be in the meeting doing something else and just be available if they're needed. That's not what I'm talking about, you know? So depending on the meeting and depending on what you're doing. Now, the other thing that I'll say, just because we're on the topic, is that phone calls have gotten a lot more popular. Have you noticed? Phone calls are much more popular because we don't all want to be on video all day long for every call. So if it doesn't need to be a video call, consider making it a phone call. So those are, you know, some of the lessons from the guts of the pandemic that the leaders that I've been supporting have taught me and that I've seen and things. But we're here to talk about the neurobiology of public speaking. And my heartfelt, super deep goal today is to give you a few principles that will dramatically impact the power and the reach of your voice and your influence. So if I could actually do that, would that be a good way to spend our time together? Will you give me a nod if you're on video? Okay, good. Well, guess what? After doing this for over a decade, I promise you that this works. So let me tell you where it came from, because I think that it's relevant and I think it could give you a great way to contextualize what we're going to do. I've always been the guy with the soft skills, and I always worked with a lot of people who had the hard skills. And I was always very jealous of them because they seemed better than I was. They made more money. They had more education. They seemed smarter. You know, they called what I did fluffy, you know? And so I would go around trying to prove I was valuable while I secretly felt less valuable. And it was just awkward. And I was always an early stage employee or a founder or a co-founder at internet companies. And I always ended up with the title chief evangelist because that's just what I did. And even though I raised several $100 million in Silicon Valley and beyond with my various teams, now I have to say I never had a successful exit. I can raise it, but I never had a successful exit. So, but even though I brought in all kinds of money like that, they still called what I did fluffy. And I was just going around kind of upset about that, trying to prove I was valuable, didn't really feel valuable. And like I said, it was just super awkward. And so, then in 2009, I went to TED for the first time. And I just saw person after person up on that stage at TED giving the most unbelievable talks that I had ever heard. And so the first thing that happened for me is that I really got the power on a whole new level of that kind of excellence in communication. And I'll give myself some credit for this. I also realized that even though I had basically been a public speaker my whole life, I had not been doing that. You know, that was a whole new level. And so I came home and got very involved in the TED and the TEDx community. I've never worked for TED, but I did volunteer. And I do still volunteer a lot for TED and TEDx because it's an all volunteer effort, TEDx events are. And so at one of the very first ever TEDx events, I was volunteering for my friends who ran it in TEDx Santa Monica. And we had this guy who was speaking that day, who was the guy that I was looking forward to hear. He had the most exciting topic. He was the one I was looking forward to the most. And when he got up on stage and started to talk, I, along with everybody else, just totally checked out because he was so nervous and awkward that we all thought we were going to throw up. And I remember just being incredibly sad. I was just sad because I'd seen that so much in the people that I'd worked with, the people who had so much education and wanted so badly to make a difference and had so much to offer and such brilliant ideas, but just couldn't quite make the connection between their mouth and someone else's ears. So I was sad for a while. And then I will admit the evil part of me kicked in. And I remember sitting there quietly to myself in that auditorium going, ha, 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 hard skills guy is blowing it, neener, calls what I do fluffy, you know? And as I was indulging the evil part of myself, my buddy Michael Weiss walked over and he leaned down and completely changed my life. He said, dude, we got to do something to help people like this. And I distinctly remember it was like a light bulb switching on. And I realized that if I just got over myself for 5 minutes, I could difference for that guy. If I stopped honoring the chip on my shoulder and I started honoring the people right there in front of me, I could make a difference. So I went home that night and took, for me, what was just the most momentous step probably in my life. I started to create what I now call the Speak Like a Leader Bootcamp. It's what I named it then. It's kind of a silly name, but what I did differently is I based everything I did in that on principles that were based in neurobiology and evolutionary biology of human beings. And that just made all the difference because I wanted to show people not only what works when it comes to communicating with and leading and inspiring and influencing human beings, but also why it works based in science. And that completely changed my life. As you heard, you know, I pinch myself when I say who I get to work with. I train for NASA regularly. I've trained all of the active astronauts. I train General Electric Aviation. I train top leaders at Johnson & Johnson. And, you know, that is, by the way, not how it was looking like it was going to go 10 years ago. This was a complete change, you know, all the jobs I had that paid way too little money and all those useless stock options I had, you know. But that decision to base it all in science also means, and I didn't think of this then, it also means it's super effective. That's why we like science, because science works, right? And when we base things in science, they tend to work. So that was just one of the most momentous things of my life. And it completely altered the pathway of my life. And I am thrilled to share with you some of the absolute key, most important things out of those principles. So should we do that? Okay. So the first thing that I say based on all of that is that communicating with human beings is not logical. Have you noticed? Yeah, some smiles. Yeah, it's not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But here's the thing. Anyone who goes in thinking that logic should win, well, in a world where should matters, maybe you're right, but in this world, should doesn't matter at all. And logic by itself is necessary, but it is not sufficient. You must have something else. So let's talk about the biology of what that something else is and why it is so. If you look at a cross section of a human brain, what you'll see is the brain stem. That's the part that runs all the autonomous functions like our breathing and our heartbeat and things like that. And it's very, very old. And then wrapped around that is the midbrain. And together, these two pieces form what's called the Paleo Mammalian brain, or the limbic system, or the emotional brain. Okay, that's this part. Now, I like to call it the Paleo Mammalian brain because that sounds old, and it's very old. And the other thing is that all mammals have this structure. So, you know, your dog, your cat, that horse, the cow, all mammals have paleomammalian brains. And this is the part of our brain that is tasked with keeping us alive. So it's always listening for things, watching for things, trying to make sure nothing's sneaking up on us. And I'm going to say something kind of weird about the brain here. So I'll say it twice. So this is kind of weird, but I'll say it twice. This ancient paleo mammalian brain does not have access to language or logic or reason. That all lives in our neocortex, the new brain, the cerebral cortex wrapped around the outside of the paleo mammalian brain. So the ancient brain doesn't have access to those things, language or logic or reason. That's all in the paleo or in the cerebral cortex. But it does, this ancient part does have access to reality on a fundamentally deeper level than we will ever have conscious access to. Okay, so I'll say it again. This ancient part does not have access to language or logic or reason, but it does have access to reality on a fundamentally deeper level than we will ever have access consciously with our neocortex. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Here's what I mean. This is the part of our brain that smells things like pheromones. And it notices things like facial micro expressions. And it notices all of the minute body language and tonal variation and all those things that we will never notice consciously. But this ancient paleo mammalian brain is picking up on those signals all day long, but it doesn't have access to language, so it can't talk to us. So the way it communicates with us is through gut feelings. That's where your gut feelings come from, is your ancient paleo mammalian brain. And it is picking up real signals. It's just we'll never pick up those signals consciously. It sees patterns in things, smells pheromones, notices facial microexpressions, and more. So what this means is, if your mom didn't tell you, I'm going to tell you now. And if she did, I'll reinforce it. Trust your gut. Trust your gut. That's good advice, right? If the elevator door opens and the hair stands up on the back of your neck, don't get in there. Don't get in there. That's your paleo mammalian brain giving you a signal. And here's the thing. If it was a nice person in there, they'd want you to trust your gut. And if it's not a nice person in there, then you shouldn't be getting in there anyway, right? So trust your gut. However, we all think that we live in our logical brain. At least I know many of us do. Yeah. So John, I get this whole emotional thing, but I'm the kind of person that weighs out the logical choices, and I'm going to check the boxes and weigh things out, and then I'll make a logical decision. I'm not one of those emotional people. Okay. Well, even if that's true, even if you do weigh things out and you say you're going to make a logical decision, if I took any of you and put you in an fMRI machine and we watched your brain in real time as you made that decision, what we would all see is that, boom, your ancient paleo mammalian brain fires first, making the decision. And then right after that, your cerebral cortex, the logical part of your brain, the neocortex, the new brain, fires nanoseconds after, but it fires afterwards, not making the decision, just agreeing with or disagreeing with the decision that your ancient paleo mammalian brain made. So what does this matter? Here's where the rubber meets the road. Okay. I want you to tell me if you've ever or if you've never had an experience like this. Just imagine in whatever you do, the similar experience. Do you like the product? Oh yeah, we like the product. Do you think it's priced right? Oh yeah, certainly good price. Do you think it would make a difference for you? Oh yeah, sure. Make a big difference. Well, do you want to sign the check and we'll start delivery? No, we're not ready yet. We want to think about it a little bit. We're not quite ready. Okay, so what just happened, right? Yes, 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 no. I do a lot of work with a lot of people who have a lot on the line. People raising funds for their startups, people out pitching multi-million-dollar business deals, leaders who want their teams on board. I do executive coaching with people who've got big teams they need to convince to do things. And when people get yes, 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 no, they get very upset. And one of the common questions is, yeah, that happened to me. I mean, like, what happened? Were they lying? No, No, it's very obvious in hindsight. It's just not very obvious until it's in hindsight. Here's what happens. Yes, 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 no. Okay, watch this. Logic, 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 emotion. We did not make the emotional connection with them that would allow them to give us what I call the fourth and most important yes. Yes, 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 yes. Now look at it. It's easy to understand this when you look at the physiology. The logical brain is wrapped around the outside of the ancient paleo mammalian limbic system emotional brain. So it actually has to go through the ancient brain to get to the spinal column to generate a yes or sign a check or take an action. Yeah. So if we do not put the ancient paleo mammalian brain at ease, if we don't generate some feeling of trust and like we're in the same tribe and we connect on some level, then what we'll always get is yes, 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 no. Okay. So I tell people, and this is a little bit hard to deal with at first, but until you have an emotional connection, all the logic in the world will just bounce off because it cannot make it through that ancient paleo mammalian brain until we have that connection. So we're going to talk about a couple ways to make that connection in a minute, but let me give you one quick thing just to illustrate this point. Okay. Small talk has been misnamed. Small talk has been misnamed. And the reason we're confused about it is because it genuinely doesn't matter what we talk about. We could talk about anything. We could talk about the weather. We could talk about your daughter and what college she's going to. We could talk about our love for horse racing. It really doesn't matter what we talk about, but here's what matters. That we talk about something that can connect us and that can bring us together emotionally, make us feel like we're in the same tribe, start to build trust between us. And when you do that, small talk is no longer small talk. Small talk is big talk. Small talk is big talk. And often the small talk that everyone discounts that happens before the meeting even starts, right? That's setting you up to get that fourth and most important yes at the end of the meeting after you've given them all the logical stuff. Does that make sense? So small talk can be very big talk, and it can be your direct access to that yes, 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 yes that we all want. Good? Okay, any questions about this, especially people that I can see on video? If you nod like, yes, this is cool. Should we keep going? Do you have a question? Are you driving you? Okay. All right, good. Okay, so should we do the next one? The next piece? Okay, so the next piece of the neurobiology, I'm going to give you two major pieces today. First one is the paleo mammalian brain versus the neocortex. The second one is encapsulated in this dramatically original saying that you've never heard before that goes, "You've got to believe it. If you don't, they won't." Okay, that's not actually super original, is it? You've heard that before. Sales 101, everybody tells you that all the time. But here's the thing we don't talk about when it comes to that saying is why that's true. And here's why that's true. Mirror neurons. Mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are something that we have in our bodies. Someone just won a Nobel Prize recently for their work in mirror neurons. But mirror neurons are neurons that we have in our bodies that have us have the experience that we are seeing other people have. So what I mean is if somebody walks in the room and they're happy, look, some of you are smiling now just because I said happy, right? And if they walk in and they're sad, yeah. See, and you look sad now. Oh yeah, because we don't even know what we're sad about, but we're sad because they're sad. And if I were doing a cooking show and I had a big bunch of purple carrots that we grew in our backyard, and I had a big old butcher knife, and I was chopping up the carrots and telling you about all the benefits of the. Okay, now I want to point out something, okay? I don't have purple carrots. I don't have a big old butcher knife, but you jumped because you do have mirror neurons, and they are always working. They're always on. And here's the thing that I wish I would have known much earlier. They're always mirroring you. They're always mirroring you. When you walk in the room and everybody turns to look, oh, they're mirroring you. When you raise your hand and you share something at the meeting, oh, they're mirroring you. When you're the top of the hierarchy, if you're the boss, they're always mirroring you. That's why some of these companies that are just so awful, like doesn't matter who they hire because everybody's mirroring up, and until they replace the C-suite, nothing's going to change, right? Because people are always mirroring you if you're at the top of the hierarchy. And so here's the big thing for this. Let's talk about this when it comes to public speaking. Yeah. Have you ever had a bad audience? Anybody on video ever have a bad audience? Raise your hand. Yeah, I've had them too, right? We've all had them. Come on, that bad audience. Well, guess what? After I discovered this, after I really got this and took it on, I have never had a bad audience again. I just never, ever have bad audiences anymore. And here's why. Because I know they're always mirroring me. So if it looks like they're starting to go south, if it looks like it's turning into a bad audience, I don't blame them anymore. I look over here and I say, okay, what do I need to do to give them something even better to mirror? And I made a commitment to myself to never, ever let an audience pull me down in my mirroring. I'm always going to keep putting something out that's good for them to mirror and pull them up. Does that make sense? Now, I really want to land this with you, but no pointing, okay? No pointing or shouting out. Think about the people you know who are grumpy, okay? No pointing. But think about those people you know that are grumpy, right? They walk in the room, everybody gets grumpy. They grump around for a while. Everybody grumps back at them. Everybody's grumpy. And then the minute they leave, we're all fine again. But wherever they go next, everybody's grumpy. So they go around through their whole life thinking everybody's grumpy. But what they don't realize is everybody's just mirroring them, right? And I'm telling you, this sounds maybe a little bit much, but this is just the truth. When I really started to take this on, when I really fully got this and owned it, it became, no kidding, like Jedi mind powers. These are not the droids you're looking for. Oh, these are not the droids we're looking for. Move along. I mean, life became malleable in a way I had no idea it ever could be when I took this on. So I invite you, not just in public speaking, but everywhere in life, to really take on that they're always mirroring you. This is scientific proof for the fact that you're always getting whatever it is you're putting out. Make sense? Really powerful leadership lesson for me too. All of a sudden, I started to think about, what if the results my teams are producing are just a reflection of who I'm being and what I'm bringing? What if they're mirroring me even in their results? So, and look, not like it's true, not like you should use that to blame yourself, but if you take that on like it's a possibility, it gives you a whole new place to approach your leadership from. Yeah. And as a public speaker, it's the best thing I ever did. Best thing I ever did was to stop ever thinking that it's a bad audience and start getting, I just need to give them something better to mirror. Good. All right. So
John,
yes.
I think there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to answer it. Or
I would love to. Yeah. It's just hard for me to keep up with the chat.
No.
So you feel free to stop me.
Okay. Catherine asked, why don't the negative people mirror to the positive people in the room? Does negative trump positive?
Okay, usually it does because positive people give up too easily. Have you ever noticed that the negative people are super committed to that? Right? And they don't believe that you're actually as happy or as positive as you are. And if you let their assault on that win, then it will win. And it takes a few times, right? And this is something I talk about a lot. I do an ongoing leadership series with it's a large group coaching program that I just do ongoingly called Live Like a Leader. And one of the things that I talk about in there a lot is if you want to succeed at this, you need to be willing to speak to them like they're great. Let's say it that way. You need to keep giving them something positive to mirror, no matter how committed they are to being negative, right? You just keep standing for their greatness and being positive with them one more time, then they can argue for their smallness. And here's what happens. All of a sudden, whether it's 3 times or 5 times or 10 times, all of a sudden they realize you're not going to give up. And they can trust you to be that person. And boy, then you have created what I call a forever fan, because that's somebody, you saw their greatness even before they did. And you weren't willing to sell them out just because they tried to come across cynical. Does that make sense? So it seems like negative trumps positive, but it doesn't. You just have to be willing to be positive one more time. And that negativity will just shatter like a sheet of glass. And they will be so grateful to you that you didn't let them win. Good? All right. So I would love to talk about a thing that I call the Bates equation of public speaking, because I'm not that creative and I'm slightly narcissistic. But the Bates equation of public speaking has made an enormous difference for a lot of the executives that I work with. And I want it to make a huge difference for you. So let's go through the Bates equation of public speaking. And it's a very simple equation. 1 times 20 times 3,000. That's me speaking for 20 minutes to 3,000 people. So that's 1 times 20 times 3,000. That's 60,000 minutes that I consume, 60,000 minutes of human life that I consume in one 20-minute talk to 3,000 people. Let's divide by 60 to get hours. That is 1,000 hours of human life that I take up with one 20-minute talk to 3,000 people. And I don't want to prepare. Yeah, no, I like to wing it, because I'm pretty good at winging it. And winging it takes way less time. And, if I were to practice and practice, then I would come across canned, it wouldn't seem as authentic and original and everything. Well, that's what I used to think, right? But then I went to the TED conference. And what I realized very quickly is that those people that I think I probably thought they were getting up there and winging it, they practiced for more than a year, most of them. 6 months minimum, more than a year, most of them. And that's why those talks are so fabulous. And then my friend told me, a good friend of mine who was friends with Steve Jobs, worked with Steve Jobs, specifically on all those wonderful talks he gave. You know how people call him the natural communicator? Well, guess what? After they wrote the talk and got it perfect, Steve Jobs would practice for an hour for every minute he was going to be on stage. That means he practiced for 45 hours for a 45-minute talk. Now, guess what? You would be really good too if you practiced for 45 hours, a 45-minute talk, don't you think? It's not that he's a natural communicator. That's just how we get out of practicing as hard as he did. Right? So what I realized is there is this place where if you practice a lot it looks like you practiced a lot. And that's not the goal, right? That's kind of awkward. It's a little robotic. It looks like you practiced a lot. Well, in honor of Chris Anderson of TED, I call this area the uncanny valley, right? Like it's the valley of awkwardness, the valley of awkwardness. And the way you get across the valley of awkwardness is through more practice. At a certain point, you practice so much that it seems like you didn't practice, right? And then all you need to do is remember that this is the first time they've heard it, not the 100th time you've done it, and you will have the speech of your life. And here's the thing that happens. Because you have taken the time to become a master of your own speech, everybody, and an expert in your own speech, everybody just thinks that you're an expert at everything. It's not logical, it's biological. And because you have full control over how well you do that speech and how much of an expert you are in your speech, you can also dramatically impact how people think of you by just really devoting the time and energy it takes to prepare and then practice that speech really well. So that Bates equation, think about also, think about what if you had to pay everybody to show up, right? What if I had to pay all of you your hourly rate to be here with me, right? And I had to organize it, and I had to pay the organizers to do it, and I had to get sponsors. Like, I don't think I have enough money to do that. But if I'm not worth that, somebody's paying that. If I'm not worth that, I'm not getting invited back very often, So to think about the resources and the time that's going into hearing what you have to say is a great way to convince yourself to put more time on your calendar to prepare. May not be what you wanted to hear, but if you really want to do a great job, then this is what you'll need to hear. Yeah. So put that time in your calendar in your day job. Now, here's one more look at this, just in case, because I really think one of the biggest things that I do is I give executives the permission to prepare their talks and prepare their remarks and to spend more time on them than they think they should, because I help them understand how important they are. Yeah. So I'd like to do that for you. So one more angle on this is from the acronym PIE, P-I-E. And here's what PIE means. P is your performance. This is all that time you spend doing the stuff you do. Then there's your E, your exposure, that 3-minute report you get to give to the board, or that 5-minute talk you get to give, or that all hands meeting that you lead, right? It's a teeny tiny amount of the overall time you spend at work. However, that is the thing that disproportionately influences the I, the impression of you. You do all this work, you have this fragment of a moment to get exposure, and that together informs their what they think of you, right? The impression you make. So that says to me that this teeny little moment of exposure is worth a lot more time and preparation than most people seem to be putting towards it. Does that make sense? If you're on video, give me a nod or shake your head or tell me. Yeah. So this is a really good excuse to put that time in your calendar during the day, during your work day, because it is also your work. And in fact, it's kind of like going to school and really learning a lot and being super brilliant, and then not putting in the time to get good grades. Then nobody knew you learned anything, right? The grades aren't the learning, but they're the proof that you learned. So this is kind of like that. Make sure that you give yourself the time you need to do that presentation part well, because it disproportionately affects what the impression that you get to make. All right. So then I would also love to share with you some of the best advice I ever got. but let me just make sure that you would be interested in this. Does anybody ever have a fear of public speaking? Raise your hand if yeah. Okay, so at least a few of you. I will admit that last night I had a stomach ache, and I think it's because I'm doing this big global launch of a free course. We're going to tell you about it later, called Powerful Virtual Leader. And I've got people coming from all over the world to this course. And last night I had such a stomach ache, I couldn't go to sleep. And it finally dawned on me, I think I'm nervous. That doesn't usually get me that hard. But so I think we all get nervous, even those of us who love to do public speaking, and the people that say, well, I don't really bother me anymore. So let me give you some of the best advice I ever got for public speaking, but it also applies in leadership and life, I believe. So I got this advice to very different sources. One is someone that I think we all know and love, Snoop Doggy Dogg. No kidding. Back in the day, D-O-double-G dog, Snoop Dogg gave me this advice. I also got the same exact advice, but said very differently, from one of the top leadership trainers anywhere in the world. Her name's Candace. So Snoop Dogg and Candace said the same thing, but used very different words. And I think it's the best advice I ever got. So here we go. We'll start with Snoop Dogg because he's very succinct. He's a poet. He's kind of a genius. He said, don't be nervous, be at their service. Now that's pretty brilliant, I got to say. Don't be nervous, be at their service. Now, Candace said basically the same thing, but she said it differently. So here's how she said it. She put a little more meat on the bones. She said, John, if you get up on stage and you have your attention on yourself, then you have your attention on a minor ball of petty concerns that's of no real interest to anyone but you. Ouch. You know, it's true. It hurts, but it's true. She said, if, however, you get up on stage and you have your attention on the audience and the difference that you're going to make for them and the difference they're going to make for the people in their lives because of it, now you have your attention on something worth thinking about. Don't be nervous, be at their service. Yeah. So here's how this works. Have you ever noticed you're nervous? Yeah. Okay, then you can do this, because here's how it works. The minute you notice you're nervous, let me ask you, who is nervous about? I know that's a weird question. People are like, what are you talking about? Who is nervous about? Okay, here's who's nervous. This is who nervous is about. Nervous is all about you. Nervous is you worrying about what they think of you, right? So here's the easy coaching. Stop being so narcissistic. Okay. All right. I'm kidding, but it's true, right? Like, so, but here's the thing, really. When you're nervous, it is because you're focused on yourself. And it really is you thinking about what they think of you, being worried about that. So the minute you notice you're nervous, remind yourself, oh, that's about me. Actually, I'm here for them, and get your attention over on the audience. And now something magic happens. A little teeny bit of your nervousness goes away. Not all of it. In fact, not even very much of it, but a little bit goes away. And now that your attention is on the audience, we call what's over here excitement. Physiologically, it's basically the same, you know, sweating, maybe a little shake in your voice. You're just so excited, right? So the minute you notice you're nervous, you say, that's about me. This is about them. Get your attention on the audience and call that feeling that you have excited. You can't be nervous and excited. You're just nervous and focused on yourself, but you can be very excited and focused on the audience. Does that make sense? So I promise this is life-changing if you just do it. So maybe take a yellow sticky and put, don't be nervous, be at their service. Put that someplace where you'll notice it the next time you're tempted to. I love it, Deb. Next time you're going to be doing anything where you think you might get nervous, where you're speaking on a conference call or talking at an event or something, don't be nervous, be at their service. That will make a huge difference for you. It's definitely made a big difference for me. And let me just share something really quickly, because I hear a lot of things like fearless business women's forum and fearless speaking. And you know what? It's not about fearless. Look what happened to Jesus, Joan of Arc, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Socrates. I mean, got noticed by the group and it didn't go well, right? So it makes sense that we're nervous. Fearless is not part of the equation. Fearless, my dad was in Vietnam in combat, and he told me when I was young, son, you do not want a fearless foxhole buddy. You know, because I was a teenager, I was all impressed by fearlessness and all this. And he said, really, you don't want a fearless foxhole buddy. That guy will get you killed. You want a courageous foxhole buddy, somebody who has their fear, but will still take action if it's warranted. And that's what's truly inspiring, right? So it's not about being a fearless public speaker. It's all about being a courageous public speaker who is committed to something bigger than yourself. Otherwise, why take that risk, right? So don't be nervous, be at their service. And if you're nervous, don't beat yourself up. You should be scared. Public speaking is dangerous, but you've got something that matters more to you than your fear, so you can step through it with your courage. Yeah. And by the way, I do want to acknowledge, as you do that over and over, you start to teach your fear something. I don't think it'll ever go away completely, but it starts to see that courage is just going to win, you know? And so over time, this practice can be very powerful and self-reinforcing, and can even make you more comfortable, you know, the night before or the 5 minutes before, or whenever it is that we all have our moments. Yeah. Okay. So we have just enough time, if you would like it, for me to share with you the 3 ways to connect with and inspire any audience, anywhere, anytime. Would that be interesting? Kim's nodding. Okay. You know these, so you think that's a good one, Kim? Okay. All right, good. So we'll do the 3 ways to connect with and inspire any audience, anywhere, anytime. And the kind of good news is you don't even have to trust me, because I'm quoting total masters in the field. The first one is a guy named Les Brown. And Les Brown's one of the most requested, popular, highly paid public speakers of all time. And he really deserves that. He's amazing. And years ago, he told me, people don't connect with your successes. They connect with your messes. Your message is in your mess. Now, he doesn't mean just get up and complain. That's not what he means, right? Oh, I messed this up, right? He means people connect with your messes, the places you failed, the places you fell down, the places you embarrassed yourself, and what you learned from that. Very crucial. You must share the lesson. Now, I'm trying to coin this term, so please take it and use it. I call that insightful vulnerability. Not just vulnerability for vulnerability's sake, but insightful vulnerability. And so I'll give you a quick example. It's 2000, the year 2000, late 2000. I have just lost one of those companies where I raised over $80 million with my other co-founders. We were doing really, really well. And then the dot-com crash came and our investors said, we don't think you're going to be profitable enough. And 7 days before my birthday, they pulled the plug, October 20th, 2020, and we were done. And I was so angry and upset and ashamed and embarrassed and hurt and sad that I had an autoimmune disease onset that almost killed me. So I'm sitting in the hospital in San Francisco, not sure if I'm going to make it out. In fact, it's not looking very good for me. The doctors are looking at me like they're really worried, which is not a great feeling. And I have a conversation with the big is. That's what I call the universe. I think there's something bigger than me. I don't know exactly what it is, but I call it the big is. And I said, big is, I feel like I've really led a small and selfish life. And I don't want it to end like this. And if you will please let me walk out of here, I promise you that the number one thing that I will care about for the rest of my life from now on is making a difference. That will be my number one driving motivator. If you just please let me live. And I got to live, and I was not okay for a long time. And it was a tough recovery, but I'll tell you what, every single day after that has been gravy, has been a total gift, because that moment scared me so bad that it completely changed my perspective. And I really do care most about how can I make a difference, and everything else is important, but secondary. So here's the thing. If that means anything to you, you can have it, and you don't have to almost die for it, because I did. And you've got stories like that too. And at first they're scary to tell, because who wants to admit that big mistake, right? But what you'll find is that when you go first, everybody wants to go second or third or fourth, right? And this is what I call a true leadership opportunity. Leading at the buffet table, not a big deal, right? Anybody'd be willing to do that. Doesn't really help. However, if you go first sharing where you failed and what you learned, if you go first with insightful vulnerability, you open up a magical space where everybody else can go second, third, and fourth. And boy, I'll tell you what, we'll stay up all night having that conversation, and no one will ever forget it, because it's a conversation that makes a difference. But everybody's terrified to go first. That's a great leadership opportunity. Yeah. You ready for number two? Number two. Okay. This one's really good because it's very important, because you need to talk about your successes sometimes. And you don't want to risk turning people off, right? Because people don't connect with your successes. So how do you talk about them in a way that doesn't turn people off? It's from a guy named Craig Valentine. He was the 1999 world champion of speaking. He's a friend and a mentor. And he told me, John, don't make yourself special. Don't be a guru. Make the process special. Okay, now here's an example of that real quick from my own life. I went to East High School here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I took debate purely because Joni Babelis, the most beautiful girl in 8th grade in my mind, took forensics. That's debate and public speaking. So I did it just because she did it. So totally random. And I had a fabulous coach named D.L. Smith. He just passed recently. Thank heavens I got to see him before he did. And thank him, because he was a really fabulous coach. And here's the thing. In my high school career, I took first, second, or third at every contest I ever entered except one. And that one was my freshman year. And that judge chased me down 2 years later at a totally different debate meet and apologized to me and said, you know what? I gave you a loss 2 years ago. I've regretted it ever since. You should have won. I'm sorry. I'm just glad I could tell you. So pretty successful debate career, right? However, that was not about me. That was pure luck that I followed Joni Babelis, pure luck that I had D.L. Smith. And here's the other piece that's really crucial. I did anything D.L. Smith said because I thought he was cool. It's not because I was committed to being coachable. I was not, right? But D.L. Smith was so cool. I did anything he said just because I thought he was cool. So I had a great coach and I was coachable. Both of those things happened by accident, but because they happened at all, I had an extremely successful debate career and public speaking career in high school. So the process is find a great coach and be coachable. Look at Tiger Woods. You know, he had multiple coaches, None of his coaches could beat him at golf, or they would have beat him at golf, right? But together they had him, because he was coachable, they had him beat everybody else forever, it seemed. Yeah. So find a great coach and be coachable. Now, if you talk about your successes and you identify a process every time, now people are really happy to hear about your successes because you're giving them a process that could work for them too. Make sense? Because I want you to talk about your successes. It's one of the things that I see, not to be too general, but mostly with the women executives I support versus the women have a much harder time talking about their successes. That's just what I notice. I don't know if it's true for you, but if it is, this is a great way to be able to talk about your successes, identify a process. And now it seems more valuable anyway, because if it's just you randomly being successful versus you using a process that succeeds, the process is more long-term, right? It's more sustainable. Good. You ready for the last one? Okay. This is from a woman named Nancy Duarte, and she does the great visuals like the PowerPoints and Prezzies for a lot of those wonderful TED Talks. And she says, don't be the hero of your own talk. Make the audience the hero. Don't be Luke, be Yoda. And now, even though I'm up here on the space station, it's a little dangerous, I'm going to do something for you. We've got the lightsaber that Kimberly mentioned. All right, so here's what we're going to do. First off, I'm going to show you Luke Skywalker, the hero, and then we'll try taking Nancy's advice, being Yoda or Obi-Wan. Sound good? You ready? Can you handle this? Okay, good. All right, here we go. Let's see if I'm, these things are dangerous. So here we go. Thank you very much. Okay, so, it's a tight space, but that's pretty cool, right? Luke showing off with the lightsaber. It's pretty fun. These things are pretty cool, great noises. But let's try it again and take Nancy's advice. Instead of being Luke, I'll be Obi-Wan or I'll be Yoda. Yeah, this is what it would look like. This is an elegant weapon from a more civilized time. And if you practice and use the Force, you could change the destiny of the galaxy. And the Force is strong with you. Try it. Come on, reach up. Take it. Aspen, Maria, Christy, Tanya, take it. There you go. Very good. Oh, wonderful. So if you practice and you use the Force, you could change the destiny of the galaxy. Thank you. All right. So now I'm going to ask one of those obvious questions. Which one was more fun? Number two. Yeah, number two. So here's what I want you to imagine for a moment. You are speaking somewhere and you share one of your messes and what you learned from it. Then you share a couple of successes and the processes that led to those successes. And then you bundle it all up and you give it to the audience and tell them to go take their hero's journey using these tools you just gave them. Here's what I promise. That's always going to be a winner. That speech will always be good. Even if you forget things in the middle and don't have a great opening or whatever, that will always be a great speech. And now I want to ask you a quick question before we go. I want to share with you a very famous quote from Maya Angelou that you've probably heard before. I want to know if this sounds any different now than it would have at the beginning of our time together. Maya said, I've learned that people will forget what you did, people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So what I wonder is, does that sound a little more neurobiologically sound to you now? Do you picture the paleo mammalian brain and mirror neurons and go, yeah, Maya, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So all of these things will make an enormous difference for you in public speaking, but don't leave them there. My request is that you take all of this everywhere that you are communicating with human beings. And I think I maybe pushed it up against the top of the hour. I don't know. If there's a burning question, I'd be happy to answer it, but I know a lot of people got to jump. So just let me say, you now know that my number one goal in life after that experience is to make a difference. And here's what I know. I've done this before when no one's listening, and it doesn't make any difference. So what I'm clear about is your generous listening, like you've given to me today. That is my only access to the most important thing in my life, which is making a difference. So thank you for your generous listening. And I appreciate you letting me join you today.